What's up, guys? Today is March 21st of 2020. Welcome back. We got a couple of things to talk about in this video. We're going to cover a couple of main stories, one of them being that we have the first NFL personality to be diagnosed with COVID-19. They're telling us Sean Payton tested positive for the disease. We'll talk about March 19th, the date of this story, why that's significant to the Saints, and how it lines up nicely with Sean Payton. We're also going to talk about a couple of recent deaths in the news by the numbers. The first one I want to touch on is singer Kenny Rogers, who's passed away at the age of 81. And we'll see how this date lines up not only with his name and his last album, but also an episode of Seinfeld that he starred in back in the year 1996. We also had the death of a Cardiff City footballer from the United Kingdom, or in Wales, and we'll touch on this as well. So first, let's talk about Sean Payton. Now, I do also have a post on the numerology of Rudy Gobert, who was the first NBA player to be diagnosed with coronavirus, which led to the suspension of the league immediately prior to the Jazz's game against the Oklahoma City Thunder, that same day that the World Health Organization declared coronavirus to be a global pandemic. Rudy Gobert plays for the Utah Jazz, which sums to 113. It was the date 11/3 on which the National Basketball Association suspended all operations. The National Basketball Association equals 11/3. 113 is the Gematria of Kobe Bryant, whose death preceded this entire epidemic, and which has led to the entire world pretty much losing its mind. Notice how coronavirus pandemic sums to 113 in our reverse reduction method. In ordinal, this sums to 220. Here we are in 2020, and certainly this will be the year remembered for this pandemic. So once again, now we have the first NFL celebrity to be diagnosed with the disease, and this too, of course, is by the numbers. Here's a brief look at the Wikipedia page for Sean Payton. Notice how he was born. I'm sorry, he's 56 years old. I worded this wrong in my blog post. Sean Payton, currently 56 years old. This is the reduction value of coronavirus. Now, just yesterday, I made a tweet pointing out that Governor Christopher Newsom told residents that 56% of them will be infected with coronavirus in 8 weeks. And why the number 56? We can continue to see this number coded into coronavirus propaganda. Tom Hanks and Rita Wilson, both born in the year 56, self-quarantining themselves. Hanks and Wilson equals 56 and 1303, which is the Jewish value of coronavirus. Coronavirus declared a national emergency on the 13th of March, or the date 1303. So we're being told that Sean Payton has coronavirus, or COVID-19. This diagnosis fell on the 19th day of the month. This article published on March 19th. Payton coaches for the Saints, which sums to 19 in our standard reduction method. Now, in reverse reduction, and by the way, 19, again, COVID-19 is the disease. In reverse reduction, Saints sums to 44. Notice how the 44th prime number is 193, just like the date 19/3, or the 19th of March. This was a significant number in the death of Peter Whittingham, a Cardiff City footballer. Notice how in the reverse alphabetic order, Cardiff City equals 193. And their player, who was on the roster for 11 years, died on the date 19/3. And that was exactly 193 days after his birthday, which is September 8th. Now, using the standard alphabetic order, notice how Saints sums to 82. Sean Payton was born on December 29th, meaning that the date of his diagnosis fell a span of 82 days after his birthday. If you convert this to months, we get 2 months and 20 days. And as I just pointed out, coronavirus pandemic sums to 220. Payton, the first National Football League celebrity to be diagnosed. National Football League equals 220. Of course, a sport in which 22 players on the field at all times. Master builder number sums to 220. The master builder number is 22. And 2020, certainly the year in which society is being rebuilt to a large extent. A couple other things worth pointing out is that head coach Sean Payton sums to 79 in reduction. The date of his diagnosis was the 79th day of a leap year. 79, by the way, is a prime number. Notice it's the 22nd, tying us back to the 22s that we just covered. The date of his diagnosis also had numerology of 26. That's the reverse value of Payton, and is the reduction value of COVID, virus, and disease. Something that sticks out to me about Sean Payton's Gematria is this 787 in our Latin cipher, this also called Jewish Gematria, a cipher which again uses the Latin alphabetic order, modern English characters placed at the end. Well, here we get a 787 in this cipher. Also worth pointing out the 130 using the alphabetic order. Notice how Freemasonry sums to 130 and 787 in Jewish Gematria. Well, modern Freemasonry celebrates its anniversary on June 24th, meaning this diagnosis fell a span of exactly 14 weeks before the anniversary. And something I've been paying a little bit more attention to lately is this anniversary date for football teams. It seems like news stories are also coded by this date. I pointed out here because 11/1 falls exactly 140 days before Payton's diagnosis. And check out the reverse value of Sean Payton, 140 in the reverse alphabetic order. This year, by the way, notice how Masonry, looks like I backed out here. Masonry founded in 1717, meaning this year, it will be turning 303 years old. And of course, Masonry equals 33. A lot lining up for the United States this year. Here we're talking about COVID-19. 19 is the Hebrew gematria of kill, so is 244. And this year, the United States turns 244 years old. A lot going on this year for sure. Also worth pointing out that the name Patrick Sean Payton sums to 208 and 98. This stands out because New Orleans Saints, the team he coaches, also gives us this 208, 98 value. Head coach Sean Payton, also with a gematria alignment with coronavirus. And of course, so far he seems fine. You know, all these celebrities. I think this is a big part of this whole psyop is that you have celebrities, actors, athletes just lining up to take pictures of themselves at home. Just stay home, everybody. Stay home. Stay inside. Don't go out. Don't do anything. Stay away from the sun. Stay away from the corona of the sun. We don't need you out there. Meanwhile, the military beginning to move in under the cover of night in Italy. What's going on there? All right, so next I want to talk about Kenny Rogers and the numerology of his death. This is a pretty interesting one as well. So the very first thing that stands out about the date on which Kenny Rogers died is that it was the 20th of March. Rogers' full name is Kenneth Ray Rogers. Now, using the standard alphabetic order, his full name sums to 203 in the standard alphabetic order, just like the date 20/3 on which he died. Furthermore, if you use capital letters, a cipher we call Francis Bacon, Kenny Rogers also sums to 203. News of this man's death was not published until today, 21/3, or 213. Well, today is 213 days after the August 21st birthday of Kenny Rogers. In Satanic Gematria, the word death equals 213, and what stands out about Kenny Rogers' career is that his final album was released in the year 2013. Notice the date of November 4th that this album was released, 1104. Country singer equals 1104 in Jewish Gematria. The name of this album was You Can't Make Old Friends. And now that coronavirus is all the rage, you can't really make many new friends either, it seems. Anyway, check out the reverse alphabetic order value of this album cover. 332. This is an interesting number because blood sacrifice sums to 332. So does the word music in that same cipher. And if you measure from the 1104 release date to the date that Kenny Rogers died, you get 332 weeks. Now again, I pointed out how this date, Kenny Rogers again born on August 21st. So once again, today's news on 213 or 21/3 falls 213 days after his birthday. Well, the 213th prime number is 1303. And this is a number that, of course, stands out a lot right now because coronavirus sums to 1303 in Jewish Gematria. And to make it even more interesting, Kenny Rogers co-owns a restaurant chain called Kenny Rogers Roasters. And check out the Gematria of Kenny Rogers Roasters. 1303 in that exact same Jewish Gematria cipher. If you read up on Kenny Rogers Roasters, you find that the first one was opened in Coral Springs, Florida. And you have to appreciate that Kenny Rogers has the same 151 and 61 Gematria as Coral Springs. There seems to be something with to say about the ritual sacrifice code here. So today's numerology, today being a leap year, March 21st is the 81st day of the year. Kenny Rogers has passed away at the age of 81. In Gematria, the word ritual sums to 81 using both the standard alphabetic and reverse alphabetic orders. If you include English extended Gematria, cipher built similarly to Jewish, notice how we have these numbers of 63, 27, and 45 also in ritual. All of these numbers appear in the date numerology of the date that Kenny Rogers died, 63, 27, and you can get 45 from the alternate numerology as well. To make this even more interesting, if you measure to Kenny Rogers' next birthday, you get 154 days. Well, in the alphabetic order, ritual sacrifice sums to 154 as well. Now, there's two primary Kabbalah ciphers on my site, and notice how ritual sacrifice equals 212 in these methods. And what's interesting about this is that, we have 154 ordinal, 212 Kabbalah. Kenny Rogers dying 154 days before his birthday. This is also 212 days after his birthday. This alignment only perfectly possible in leap years like it is now. And it's interesting that ritual sacrifice is such a significant part of the code behind this death, because notice how we have this 616 ritual sacrifice. Well, this is the same as perfect number. Perfect number, 616. Well, one of the largest perfect numbers that we know of, I shouldn't say that, the third perfect number, to be more accurate, is 496. See how 496 is a perfect number? This is because all of the divisors, excluding the number itself, sum to the very number. Notice how roasters equals 496. Kenny Rogers, co-founder of Kenny Rogers Roasters. It's called the Woodfire. What is it? Give me a sec. I got to find this. Woodfire roasted chicken. That's right. This was what the logo used to say. Kenny Rogers Roasters, Woodfire roasted chicken. Also gives us a 496 in ordinal. So, I don't know. Maybe I'm picking up on nothing there, but it's interesting that all lined up so neatly. So in reduction gematria, Kenneth Ray Rogers equals 86. The date he was born had a primary numerology of 86. It also stands out as the 50, because in reverse, his name equals 229, which is the 50th prime number. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, the date on which he was on Seinfeld was also a date with a life lesson number of 50. This is the air date of the Kenny Rogers episode from Seinfeld. Anyway, his birth numerology also has 67 in addition to the 86. His most famous song, The Gambler, came out 86 days after his birthday. That episode of Seinfeld also aired a span of 86 days after his birthday. So let's look this up real quick, just so we can get a nice graphical idea here. Here's a Wikipedia page on the chicken roaster. This being the 142nd episode of Seinfeld. Original air date, as we pointed out, was November 14th of 96. Now here's where it gets pretty weird. If you measure from the date this episode aired to the day before Kenny Rogers died, Now, why would we measure to the date before he died? Well, that would be because this is March 19th, or the date written 319. This episode of Seinfeld aired on the 319th day of a leap year. Notice how that air date to the date before his death was exactly 1,218 weeks. In Sumerian Gematria, which is the alphabetic order times 6, Kenneth Ray Rogers sums to 1,218. It was the 142nd episode of Seinfeld. Seinfeld equals 142 in reverse. Notice how Seinfeld has the same gematria as Gematria. But the number 142 is significant for several reasons. One of which is that it's the value of eclipse sacrifice in ordinal. The 79 in reduction is interesting. Notice Kenny Rogers' birthday. Kenny Rogers was born on the date August 21st. August 21st was the date of the 2017 total solar Great American Eclipse. And on that date, he turned exactly 79 years old. The word murder also sums to 79. Measuring from Kenny Rogers' birth to the date of his death, he was a span of exactly 979 months old. This is the inverse of the value of total solar eclipse, 797, in the Satanic method. Singer Kenny Rogers also yields a 97. We also find that he died 37 weeks and 3 days after the most recent total solar eclipse. That's the 74th prime number, 373. Seinfeld 74, total solar eclipse 704. Some interesting alignments there, you have to say. Looks like some coordination for certain. I don't want to talk too much about this, but I touched on it earlier. Cardiff City losing a player on the date 19/3. Cardiff City equaling 193 in Gematria. And it was 193 days after Whittingham's birthday. Cardiff City FC is currently in its 121st season. See, it was founded 121 years ago. Its current season is the 121st. The name Peter Michael Whittingham sums to 121 in the standard reduction method. This is the ordinal value of blood sacrifice. 121 in ordinal. Notice the 67 in reduction of blood sacrifice. This is the reverse value of Cardiff City in reduction. 67 also a prime number, the 19th. Whittingham dying on the 19th day of the month. It was said he died from a fall or complications from one. Notice how fall equals 47, just like Cardiff. Cardiff is the Bluebirds. That's their mascot or their nickname. '47 is the 15th prime number, which I didn't list here, but he died on a date with numerology of 15. One thing I forgot to mention in my decode of Kenny Rogers. Oh, what was it? Was it from the release of his song? Yes, it was. Okay, that's odd. Remember how that Seinfeld episode lined up with March 19th? I know I'm going backwards a little bit here, but if you measure from March 19th, Kenny Rogers' last full day alive, To the date of the release of The Gambler, the song for which it said that Kenny Rogers was best known for, this is his signature song. Notice how this was released exactly 15,100 days before he died. And Kenny Rogers equals 151 in Gematria. So that was an important one. I didn't list in the post. I definitely got to add that in, though. All right. So yeah, there's been a lot of celebrity deaths recently. I certainly haven't covered anywhere near all of them. Just browsing through the chat. Sorry for you guys who are righteously upset about things and getting your messages censored, since I wasn't looking at them. It's a crazy time we're living in, guys. So I think when we look at the gematria riddles behind these celebrities who we're being told are diagnosed with coronavirus, which, by the way, coronavirus, once again, coronavirus usually just results in a cold. We're just told this is a mutation that's far beyond what we control. But as anyone with a mind can tell you, currently, we're living through a little bit of an overreaction in the world. And if anything can expose this economy as being the sham it's always been, then perhaps this shutdown will do it for people. As far as coronavirus being real, look, I certainly have my doubts about what it really is. Perhaps there is some sort of engineered respiratory disease that's making the rounds and killing some people with really weak immune systems. But it's clear that there are many, many lies surrounding coronavirus, whatever the deal is. If you look at the footage, the footage that they're using to try and scare everybody, the stuff from Italy, completely out of context, showing all these people with their heads in giant ventilators sitting outside emergency rooms, as if there's people just flooding into the hospital who can't breathe. And there's no context to any of this video. Like, are these new cases? Are these people who have been in the hospital for quite some time? No one's being interviewed at these hospitals. And, look, my job is in the medical industry, and we stock parts at hospitals and make sure that hospitals have new parts and can keep their systems going and are keeping up with maintenance schedules and whatnot. And it's not like we're seeing a surge in respirator purchases. This pandemic is... The fact that they're calling it a pandemic is a joke. I mean, that is an absolute joke. That term is completely arbitrary. And the fact that they're using it for a disease with such a low death rate and so few people infected at this stage is really, really, really bizarre. And this is what should be waking people up. If 9/11 wasn't enough, well, here we are, 19 years, one Metonic cycle later, and we're essentially facing much of the same. Mass hysteria by the public, mass deception in the media. I knew it was going to be tough for us truth seekers when the World Trade Center collapsed in on itself after 2 planes allegedly struck it, and nobody really even questioned that. I mean, I wasn't a conspiracy theorist back then because I never had a reason to be. It wasn't until 3 or 4 years later where I realized what really happened and learned about how it was carried out. But by now I was hoping that the public had a little more faith, and I made the mistake of looking at my friend's Facebook feed with everyone I know on it. And it's just sad what's going on in the world today, man. People sacrificing their lives for this bad cold. It's really bizarre, and again, I make the point I made in my rant, what if the news one day, what if for every coronavirus death story you saw, and you see it now in the local news, no matter what big city you live in, you see it on a national news level as well. I mean, this is like a complete confirmation of everything I've been saying for the last 3.5 years, is that most of our news is completely manufactured, and you're seeing all these stories follow a formula. We just learned about our first death in Wisconsin from the coronavirus. And, of course, it was a 66-year-old man And, well, of course, Corona equals 66. And then later in the day, we're told that the number of cases in the state is up to 220. Well, of course, coronavirus pandemic equals 220. So all of this news just being pumped out as if it's some sort of machine writing the articles. Is there even a human behind the scenes? I don't know. I don't think there is sometimes. But try getting this through to people, and they're literally under a spell. And I had a lot of interesting comments on one of my videos from a couple days ago suggesting that there's a massive spiritual element to this entire ritual. And I call it a ritual because I do think to some extent there's magic involved. And this is a magic spell that people in this country are under. And they've been conditioned for it for many years. And it's so fascinating now that this whole pandemic is here, and we've discovered now that this is the new 9/11. This is the new massive giant false flag that we've been waiting for years, essentially. It's clear to see now how that predictive programming was put in place. Just like it was with 9/11, we saw one event after another highlighting the destruction of the World Trade Center in cartoons, in films, in movies, all over our television screens. And then it actually happened. So despite how ridiculous the fact it was that the towers collapsed in on their own footprint, nobody really questioned it because they've already experienced it for so many years prior. And now we're seeing this same thing develop with the coronavirus pandemic, is that for so many years, literally ever since the year after 9/11, the movie 28 Days Later, and even before that, of course, too, but we've been hammered with propaganda highlighting the fact that this country is ultimately going to be overrun by disease, and there's going to be some sort of zombie apocalypse. And, of course, we're seeing nothing like the effects of that, but the mentality that people have been put into by that propaganda, we're seeing that was sort of like a cast that was molded for everybody before they were ready to release the propaganda on a grand scale. And really the only difference between the film world and the mainstream media is the logo that's giving it to you. When you go and watch a movie, you'll see the Paramount logo play before the film begins. Well, when you watch the news, you see the CNN logo go. And there's really no difference between it, yet people allow themselves to be psychologically impacted by one and not the other. However, it's the effects of both combined that truly bring about the correct mindset that they want from the people. And unfortunate as it is, you're certainly seeing that play out. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this video. I want to thank everybody who jumped in on the live stream. Please do feel free to like, share, and subscribe, not just the video, but also my blog posts. A lot of them are very straightforward, straight to the point as far as this coronavirus thing goes. And, the Tom Hanks, Rita Wilson numerology, some of this stuff is so undeniable. And, you're not going to get through to everybody. I think that's been shown at this point. People really are too far gone. I think the majority of people are just... There's a lot of words I want to use to describe them, but I'm trying to find a way to be nicer to people in this time, which is difficult to do when you're surrounded by such madness and craziness. But, maybe that's part of the challenge, right? All right, guys. Thanks again for jumping in, for everyone who contributed to the live chat. I'm going to need more moderators one of these days. Nothing against you guys. You guys are doing good work, but you're not always here, so. All right, everyone. Take care out there. Peace, love, God bless. We'll talk to you soon. See ya.